Loom of Wonder presents Dead Sun Rising by Dakota Skinner. Prologue. The morning in New Bell arrived like a fever, heavy with a humidity that felt less like weather and more like a physical sin. The air tasted of rot and boiled magnolias. The sky was a bruised expanse of violet and slate, hunkered low over the sagging balconies as if waiting for the earth to offer up a sacrifice. Dust lay dead in the alleys. Somewhere in the dark colonnade of pines, a crow called out. The town square was a bowl of heat and hate. Caius Harlow stood atop the gallows, his feet bare on the splintered pine. The rope was a coarse, oily throat cutter that smelled of old sweat and hempen indifference. His hands were bound with a finality that made his shoulders ache. He stood stripped to his salt-crusted shirt, watching the dawn crawl over the rooftops like an amber sickness. The faces below were a gallery of the damned, mothers clutching children, a preacher thumbing a Bible as if looking for a loophole in the sixth commandment. The sheriff stood nearby, staring at his own boots, his conscience probably a knot of black gristle in his chest. Caius didn't look at them. He looked past the hoodless hangman to the distant tree line, a green smear against the horizon that looked like a dream of mercy. His pulse hammered against the noose. He wasn't thinking of God or the hell that likely awaited a man of his resume. He was thinking of the girl, the way her hair had smelled like burning sugar. The high, thin whistle of the killer's voice in the dark before Caius had throttled the life out of him with hands that felt like they belonged to a stranger. Justice is a lie we tell the living so they can sleep, he thought. They only remember the fire, never the fight. The sheriff gave a jerk of his chin, a small, cowardly motion. The hangman reached for the lever. Time didn't slow, it simply ceased to be. The world became a singular point of heat where the rope met his neck. Then the lever clanked, the sound of a cell door closing on a soul, and the floor vanished. He fell. For a heartbeat he was weightless, a bird of prey descending. Then the noose snapped taut. His spine arched in a white-hot agony, his lungs seized. The world began to turn the color of skimmed milk. Then the morning cracked. It wasn't the sound of lightning. It was the sharp, surgical slap of a high-velocity rifle. The rope didn't just break, it disintegrated. Caius hit the dirt like butchered meat. He rolled into the filth of the square, his throat a ring of fire, sucking in air that felt like swallowing broken glass. The silence that followed was the silence of a tomb just before the occupant starts scratching. Then the screaming started, a jagged, hysterical choir. Where? He's loose. Sniper! Dozens of voices, jagged and unsure, filled the square like broken glass in a jar. Mothers dragged their children behind barrels. Old men ducked behind horses. A boy pointed to the rooftops, shouting, "There! There!" Though he couldn't see a thing. The lawman stuttered to life. One drew, another hesitated, rifles lifted, hands slapped leather. "He had help," someone snarled. "Planned it, bastard, planned this whole thing." Caius laid there, a fish on a hot pier, blinking at a sky that didn't care if he lived or died. And still, no one moved fast enough. That was the gift the chaos gave him. Not forgiveness, not a second chance, just a crack in the world wide enough to slip through. He rolled to his knees, his vision a fractured mirror. He staggered up and ran. He didn't pray, he just moved. Each step was a hammer blow to his skull. The gallows loomed behind him, but judgment chased him like wildfire. The first bullet bit into the dust near his heel. "Stop him! Don't let him get away!" Caius tore through the streets of New Bell like a man unmoored, each breath a burning shard beneath his ribs. The world blurred, faces shouting, horses rearing, souls pounding against cracked cobblestones. But none of it mattered except the single raw pulse driving him forward. He didn't stop, didn't look back. The rope still clung to his throat, swinging with every stride, a collar of justice that hadn't finished its job. He could feel it with every jolt of his spine, but he didn't reach for it, didn't tear it loose. There wasn't time. His mind was a strobe light of horrors, snatches of memory flashing in fractured bursts. The girl's scream swallowed by flames, the killer's wet, dying rattle. The whispered lies scribbled into forged reports that spread like wildfire, poisoning every ear. They wanted him broken, disgraced, dead. But they hadn't accounted for what burned inside him, the fire they couldn't put out. His thoughts flickered like sparks in a dying lantern. Was he too close? Too blind? Or had they always wanted someone to hang? The night before, he was the hunter, closing in on a monster with nothing but grit and the weight of his own convictions. Now he was a target running on borrowed time. His name a curse on every trembling lip in town. The chase wasn't over. He's headed north. There, by the stables. Couldn't stop, couldn't fall. If he went down, he stayed down. He hit the tree line of mosswood, his lungs burning like old coal stoves. He didn't stop until the shadows swallowed him whole. Behind him, Newbell was left with a broken rope swinging in the breeze and a story they'd tell until the wood rotted off the buildings. They'd remember the fire. They'd remember the monster they'd created. But Caius Harlow was gone, carried into the dark by a truth that was far more dangerous than any noose. Chapter 1. The hills were old and had a way of swallowing the names of men until only the wind remained to recite them. 7 years gone, and the highlands east of Fairburn kept their secrets in the dirt. Night fell like a shroud of black velvet, stitched with the rhythmic idiot chanting of cicadas and the occasional dry snap of a branch. A lantern sat hunkered in a thicket, its orange glow hooded and secret, a dying eye watching a world that didn't want to be seen. The tracks were a scar across the clearing, twin ribbons of cold iron that looked like they'd been bled into the earth. Across them sat the wagon. It was a skeletal thing, too mean to rot and too stubborn to die. Its axles had been notched with a saw, the wheels wedged into the ties with a grim surgical precision. It looked like a ghost ship anchored in the weeds. A question the coming engine would have to answer in blood or steam. They were waiting. Half a dozen silhouettes carved from the gloaming as still as headstones in a forgotten churchyard. One man squinted through a spyglass as if peering into the afterlife. Another turned the cylinder of a heavy Colt, the clicks rhythmic and final as a clock counting down to a hanging. No one spoke. The air was too thick for words. They'd tracked the timetables, cased the route, bribed the right man at the depot. If everything held to pattern, the northbound payroll train would come through at any minute. Then the earth began to hum. It started as a rumor in the soles of their boots. A pulse, a metallic groan that grew into a scream of tortured iron. The ground shuddered, the rails singing a high, lonesome vibrato that set the teeth on edge. The lantern in the brush gave a single jaundice yellow wink. A signal. Eyes turned. Someone moved. He stepped from the tree line then, moving with the unblinking certainty of a man who had already seen the end of the world and found it lacked imagination. Broad shoulders draped in a long coat that drank the dark. A wide-brimmed hat cast a shadow like an eclipse over his face. A dark vest fit close over a maroon shirt, silver buttons catching faint starlight like coins at the bottom of a well. His boots were black leather capped in dull silver, scuffed, traveled, purposeful. The gun belt was a part of him, the leather worn to the color of dried blood, the twin revolvers resting in their holsters like sleeping dogs. He looked like a man who had once walked in the light of the law and found it too dim to see by. He hadn't looked back since. The man climbed onto the wagon. He stood centered on the tracks, the rifle braced against his hip, a pendulum frozen at the top of its arc. The locomotive rounded the bend, a thundering leviathan of soot and fire. Its headlamp was a single furious eye casting a white, holy light that turned the clearing into a stage. The whistle shrieked, a sound like a woman being murdered in a tunnel. Smoke churned into the sky, blacker than the night. Still he did not move. The engine thundered closer, the rails sang beneath it. Wind pushed ahead of the machine, tugging at his coat, worrying the brim of his hat. A lesser man might have stepped down. He stayed. For a moment the world narrowed to distance. How far the train had left to travel, how long a man could trust his nerve, how quickly iron could erase flesh. Then the light swallowed him. He lifted the bandana from his neck and drew it over his mouth. A ghost reborn. Caius Harlow. Recognition flashed across the conductor's face an instant before panic took him. Brakes screamed, sparks spat wild beneath grinding wheels. The locomotive shuddered like some enormous animal fighting the bit. Closer, closer, too close. The wagon creaked under Caius's boots as the engine bore down, and for one razor-thin second it seemed the world might choose violence anyway. Then the train lurched to a stop. Metal groaned, steam hissed, silence fell hard enough to feel. Caius raised his rifle and fired once into the sky. The shot cracked the night in half. Behind him the woods erupted, and like that, the ambush began. The lot surged forward, long coats flaring like the wings of carrion birds. There was no shouting, only the grim mechanical efficiency of the harvest. Caius stepped down from the wagon and strode along the train, boots ringing softly on couplings. His rifle hung low now. Blood was expensive. He preferred not to spend it. Two figures fell in behind him. Kesh McAllister, wearing a grin that tasted of copper and greed, and Ellis Caldwell, his eyes flat and steady as a man counting graves. They reached the freight car, steel-sided and bolted tight. Caius knocked once with the butt of his rifle. Nothing. He knocked again. Movement whispered inside, boots shifting, someone breathing too fast. "We ain't here for your souls," he called with a low, gravelly drawl that made people listen. "Don't want trouble. Don't want a mess. All we need is a few things from the car and we'll be on our way." Silence. He could hear the tension behind the door. Caius waited. "We open that door, they'll shoot us dead," cried a voice from inside, muffled but close. "No," Caius said simply. "No, we won't." Still no movement. He stepped closer, placed a hand on the latch. His tone didn't shift much, but it hardened just enough to make it clear this wasn't a game. "Look," he said, "you don't want to die for a company that wouldn't pay for your coffin. So don't. Let us grab what we came for and you walk away clean. That's it." A pause. Then the bolt inside slid back with a reluctant clunk. The door cracked open inch by inch until a pale-faced rail hand peeked out. Eyes wide, hands up. "All right," the man muttered. "All right, just don't shoot." "Good choice," Caius said. Kesh moved quick between them, disarming each with a practiced rhythm, tossing their weapons into weeds. But one lingered. A young man, maybe early 20s, stood near the boxcar steps. His eyes flicked between his companions, now unarmed, and watched, and the outlaws in front of him. A beat passed. Then slowly, as if trying to convince himself, he reached for the clasp of his holster. His fingers trembled with the pressure of trying to look calm. He hesitated, just long enough to suggest he was weighing something. A bead of sweat ran down his temple, tracing a line to his jaw. His breathing turned shallow, mouth slightly open like he was trying not to choke on his own pulse. Delaney Langston, a woman with a lean face drawn tight around keen eyes and a scar carved down her right cheek, saw it before anyone else did. "Don't," she said, voice flat and cold. The young man froze, fingers twitching above the clasp like he'd touched a hot stove. Delaney's revolver was already out, cocked, aimed at the center of his chest. "I mean it," she added, stepping closer. The only thing you'll draw tonight is breath, if you're lucky. The young man raised both arms slow like gravity fought him every inch. His face was the color of skim milk, eyes locked on hers. Kesh moved in without a word, never breaking stride. One hand went to the man's hip and brushed the revolver free, fingers quick and sure. The kid didn't dare twitch. Two more of Harlow's lot stood like statues carved from iron. One's revolver hanging loose but deadly at his side, the other's repeater trained with unyielding precision on the kid's trembling form. Silence draped the moment, heavy and absolute, broken only by the unspoken warning. Any flicker of defiance or a twitch toward escape would be met with merciless force. The man stood trembling under their aim, breath shallow, arms still raised. "No sudden moves," Ellis warned, voice low and even. "Try to run and you won't make it far." The crew nodded stiffly, corralling themselves into the grass beside the train, compliant, shaken, silent. Caius gave them one last look, then turned toward the freight car. As he passed the rest of the lot standing watch, he caught Delaney watching him. Eyes sharp as broken glass. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just waited. "Keep 'em in line," he said simply. She smirked, adjusting her grip on the revolver at her hip. "Wouldn't dream of letting 'em get clever." Satisfied, Caius stepped up and into the freight car, Kesh and Ellis trailing behind. Inside, the freight car felt wrong for what it was. Warm, still, almost refined. A thick rug stretched across the floor. Leather benches lined the walls. A table bolted at center wore a velvet cloth beneath iron-caged lamps that filled the space with amber light. For a cargo hold, it looked more like a traveling parlor, opulent in a way that felt out of place. Kesh let out a low whistle. "Ain't your average freight car." "No," Caius murmured, already scanning for crates, compartments, anything worth taking. "It's not." Ellis moved to the back, pried open a storage latch, and started sorting through sealed boxes. Ammunition, old-world currency. Rations stamped with a faded federal crest. Useful, sure, but not the reason the car was locked from the inside. Kesh popped open a crate near the table, revealing neatly stacked gold bars glinting in the lantern light. He grinned wide, held one up in both hands. "Now we're talking." Caius moved beside him, flipping open the lid of another crate. Inside, rows of old-world banknotes, still banded and sealed, filled the interior. "Load it," he said simply. The three of them moved fast, stacking what they could into a pair of large canvas sacks they'd brought for the job. Gold, bills, trade goods, anything they could carry. Then Caius saw it. Bolted into the floor beneath the rear bench was a sealed glass case about the size of a coffin laid sideways. Reinforced edges framed the glass like armor plating, and within sat something they couldn't quite name. It was a prosthetic arm, but unlike any they'd seen. The metal was gunmetal black with dark chrome finish, sleek and angular in its design. Along the forearm ran thin, intricate etchings, like veins made of lightless circuitry. A symbol lined one side in faint silver, a phoenix nested within a rising flame. Just above the wrist joint, a series of glowing slits ran lengthwise along the limb. Unlit now, but clearly meant to activate when connected to something or someone. At the base of the case, a plaque read Model Ether 9, Prototype Unit Manufacturer, Orion Defense Systems, Serial 9-5X-GX37, clearance required for access, Level 5. Kesh tapped the glass with his knuckle. "Well, hell. What do you think this thing is?" Caius crouched beside it, studying the mechanism. "Looks like a weapon, or a tool, or both." Ellis knelt on the other side, trying the latches, locked tight. Reinforced bolts sunk deep into the floor. "We're not getting this open," he said. Kesh pulled a pry bar from his belt and wedged it under the seam. He gave it one solid wrench. The metal bent before the case even considered yielding. Son of a bitch! Caius stood, eyes still on the thing. For a moment something flickered behind his eyes. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition, but it passed quickly. "We're not here for that," he said. "It's bolted down and tougher than any safe I've ever seen." Kesh stepped back, disappointed. "You think it's worth something?" "Doesn't matter," Caius said. "We can't move it and we ain't wasting time. Grab what we can carry, leave the rest." He turned from the case, already motioning to the crates Ellis had stacked by the door. "Be quick. We won't get another 10 minutes before someone comes riding to check what the hell happened to their train." And in the case behind them, the arm sat still, waiting. Dormant, but not dead. Its course was set somewhere beyond sight, somewhere no one here could follow. Where it had come from or where it was meant to end, none could say. The world would carry it as it carries all such things, through hands unknown, across roads unseen, toward a destination that might never be reached.